Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the process of change. Now, I'm sure most of us have tried to make some kind of change in our lifetime, whether that's to do with health and well-being, or it could be to do with your job, housing, where we live, for example, in terms of which country we decide to live in. So change is kind of part of our life, part of our existence. And there's that saying, that change is constant. Everything, every day, every second and minute is changing. But actually, what I've come to realize is that, do people actually really understand the process of change, especially when it comes to our health and health behavior change? And this is where I predominantly work in. So when I've worked with patients and clients, I've been quite curious about their understanding of change, because when they come to see me, whether it's to do with diabetes management or weight loss, what surprises me the most is that they will tell me the story about what they've been doing, or what hasn't been working and why it's not been working. Or what they're struggling with. And when we look at this, in terms of taking a deeper dive into their story, their journey, what becomes apparent is that actually the key things that's missing from what it is they're trying to do is actually the time in which they allow themselves to make a change. And in addition to time is knowledge, and actually learning about how long it takes to make a change. And when I talk about change, I also throw in habits. As you'll see from my previous videos, I absolutely love, talking about habits, helping people to break old habits and create new habits. And this is exactly what I will do in a clinic consultation with a client. The reason for that is that, there's lots and lots of scientific evidence when it comes to behavior change, and especially in health psychology. There's tons of literature, tons of techniques and information that actually I find people don't have. And so what I love doing is teaching people, educating them about the process of change using the evidence base. And the first thing I always say is that change is not easy. And if you have been trying to make a change and you have been struggling, then that's actually not a bad thing, because it just shows that you are making the effort, but perhaps there's a few things that need tweaking. And those things could be things like having the right resources to make the change. It could be the time that people have given themselves to make the change. Or it simply could be that they've set the bar too high in terms of the change. So, for example, people are trying to lose weight, and I always come back to the weight because I find that one is the most sort of common one, where they set the bar way too high and they're actually setting themselves up to fail and not lose the weight that they want to lose. The other part of the process of change is that actually we are working against the brain. Now, the thing I say is that although the brain, is powerful, it helps us function, it's actually lazy. Yes, that's right. It's actually lazy, and it loves routine. It loves systems. It loves being, familiar with sort of all the habits that we've already created, and it actually does not like change. So the biggest thing you come up against when you're trying to make a change is the brain. And that's why it's so important, and what the evidence against shows is that we want to create change in a way that's minimal, easy, small, and consistent. And that way, what I say to people is that the brain won't notice it. It's not going to be a drastic, part of your everyday life that changes, where the brain will actually resist that change. And that's why change often feels uncomfortable, it feels difficult, because what the brain's trying to do is keep you safe, it's keeping you in the safe mode. It wants you to carry on doing what you're doing because it's easy. But actually, that doesn't lead to change. With that in mind, I actually, apart from, loving all things behavior change and the science and the evidence behind it, what fascinated me a while back actually was that actually what I'm talking about and what I've learnt about is actually out there in terms of, the spiritual space. I'm actually quite a spiritual person. I love all things, learning about sort of connecting up the spiritual world with the science world. And one of the ways in which I do that is using mindfulness, and really kind of bringing in the Buddhist side of mindfulness and learning about Buddhism, and bringing that into my work. Because again, it's been evidence-based, it's been tested to show that actually there's parts of the spiritual world that, when met with the scientific world, actually do help people to make change. And so with that in mind, I am going to kind of give you an example of the spiritual world in which I've delved into. And thanks to my amazing uncle who gifted me The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. Back in 2016, when I got this gift, I absolutely loved reading this book. And what struck me the most about this book, and what I loved about it, was that it was quite timely, because this was the time where I started to work as a health psychologist in the NHS, and I was putting together some training for dietitians and patients on behaviour change. And when I came to this page in the book, page 219 to 220, the chapter was about bringing about change. And so the key things from this chapter that I took, that the Dalai Lama has written about, is that, the first step of change involves learning. And I was like, great, this is exactly what I am kind of trying to put together in my slides, and bringing into my clinics. And he talks about education, being the most important step, the first step in thinking about the process of change. He says that learning and education are important because they help one develop conviction of the need to change and help increase one's commitment to change. And he says that conviction to change then develops into determination. So when we kind of learn and become aware of, a particular part of our health, it kind of helps us to understand. And when we understand something, we become much more aware. And awareness is very powerful, because that's where change really happens. We become more conscious of our habits, of what it is we're trying to change, which makes it slightly easier down the line. So the example he gives is, if you're trying to stop smoking, first you have to be aware that smoking is harmful to the body. You have to be educated. And so this is what I try to do in all of my sessions now, is that I do the psychoeducation part. I teach my patients and clients about, the problem that they're trying to deal with. If it's weight, if it's sleep, I teach them, I educate them about what this actually is, and why they're feeling stuck and why the problem is there in the first place. I don't just go to the end result in terms of, right, this is what you need to do, off you go. It does not work, because as the Dalai Lama says, there needs to be a conviction of the need to change. And that only comes about through education and awareness. And then that goes on to kind of develop that sense of urgency, as Dalai Lama also highlights in this book. Because then that's where we start to join those dots and think about, okay, This is why this is happening, and this is how I can, use these tools and information to make a change. So I'll finish with the why and the how, because for me, those are really, really important. And if we can understand the why and the how, we start to then plan the change, create a new system and routine, which is the essence of kind of breaking that habit loop that I've mentioned in this previous video. Click here if you haven't seen the habit loop video. And so the next time you're thinking about change, try to think about it in terms of a process. Think about the system that you've already created and how, you can actually begin to change that system by first and foremost educating, finding the credible information that you need to understand the problem first and foremost, and then think about what you can do and how you can put things into place and where you could start, the easiest place you can start to make a change, and then see the difference that it actually makes. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already done so, then please hit the subscribe button below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.